A plane is plummeting, passengers screaming, but one man stays calm. He points to a single seat and one woman follows his silent command. Will she survive? Find out how trust in chaos saved her life. Emily felt her heart race as she entered the airport. The usual rush of travelers surrounded her, each person focused on their own journey. She was headed home after a tough semester in grad school. The only thing on her mind was a peaceful flight, some sleep, and the comfort of returning. To her family, little did she know, this flight would be anything but peaceful. She boarded the plane, settled into her window seat, and gazed out as the city lights of San Diego flickered below. She hoped for an easy, uneventful journey. But there was one thing she noticed right away. A man in the front row, sitting still and calm, caught her attention. His presence was strong, like someone who didn't belong to the chaos around them. He wasn't checking his phone, nor was he nervous like most passengers. His eyes were scanning the cabin, taking in everything. Emily shifted her focus back to her window, trying to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The plane took off, the familiar hum of the engines filling the cabin. For a while, everything felt normal. But then, something unusual happened. The plane began to shake, a subtle vibration underfoot. Most passengers didn't notice, but the man who seemed so composed did. Emily could see his calm eyes narrow slightly, and she couldn't help but feel the unease in her stomach. The plane jolted suddenly, throwing drinks into the air. People gasped. Emily's heart pounded as the turbulence increased, but the man in seat 6C remained unfazed. He was calm, alert, analyzing the situation. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something everyone else didn't. The cabin crew continued their routine, offering drinks and snacks. But Emily remained on edge. The turbulence didn't feel like ordinary shakes. It was different. The man's eyes were locked on something outside, his body poised like he was calculating the next move. And then, over the intercom, the captain's voice broke the calm. "We are experiencing a mechanical issue with one of our engines. Please remain calm, as we are preparing for an emergency descent." The words were chilling. Panic spread through the cabin as oxygen masks fell from the overhead compartments. Passengers scrambled, trying to fit the masks over their faces. Emily's "wow" hands trembled as she pulled her mask on. The noise of the plane's descent was deafening. In the midst of the chaos, the man's voice cut through the panic. "Breathe slowly, stay calm." His voice was steady, authoritative. Emily turned to him, desperate for guidance. His eyes met hers, and without a word, he pointed firmly at her seat, then at her seatbelt. His command was clear. "Stay in your seat. Don't move." Emily felt a surge of trust. Despite the panic around her, she obeyed. She pressed herself back into the seat, tightened her seatbelt, and held on. Something in her gut told her he was right. This man knew what to do. His calm presence was the anchor she needed in that storm of fear. The plane dipped again, throwing passengers against their seats. Oxygen masks swung wildly. The plane groaned as though it was being torn apart. But the man in seat 6C remained calm. His eyes never left her. His finger pointed once more, a clear command. "Stay. Brace yourself." The words weren't just instructions, they were survival. The plane was descending rapidly, and every second felt like it could be the last. Passengers screamed. Flight attendants shouted instructions that were drowned by the chaos. But Emily listened to him. She braced herself, holding tight to the armrests, her body trembling but steady in her seat. The plane shuddered violently. And then there was a deafening crash. Everything went black. Emily's body slammed forward, but the seatbelt held her in place. When the plane finally stopped shaking, smoke filled the cabin, and Emily could barely breathe. But through the haze, there was one constant. The man in seat 6C. He was up, guiding passengers, his authority never wavering. He helped them out of their seats, directed them toward the exits, and ensured everyone was accounted for. His calm, unwavering presence had led them through the impossible. Emily stood shakily, her legs weak from the shock. She made her way toward the exit, where emergency crews were already arriving. As she stepped outside, the cool night air hit her, and she realized something. She was alive because of him. Mark, the man in seat 6C, had saved her. His calm had kept her grounded when the plane was falling apart. She hadn't realized it at first, but every moment, every command he had given, had been a lifeline. His presence had made the difference between panic and survival. And as the rescue teams continued their work, Emily's gratitude only grew. She watched him move through the crowd, offering quiet instructions to the emergency personnel, guiding passengers to safety with a steady hand. His authority was unmistakable, yet there was no arrogance. He was simply doing what needed to be done, with precision, without hesitation. As Emily slowly made her way toward the emergency responders, she could feel the weight of the moment settling in. The crash had been a nightmare, terrifying. But in the middle of it all, Mark had been there. Not just a passive observer, but a quiet force that had given her the strength to stay in her seat when her body screamed to move. He had known somehow that staying put was the only way to survive. Emily turned her gaze back to the wreckage. The fire was now raging, but in the chaos it seemed distant, almost irrelevant. They had made it. She had made it. And it was because Mark had commanded it. Emily's mind was a whirl of thoughts as she stumbled out of the plane, the chaos of the crash still echoing in her senses. Her legs were weak, her body trembling from the shock and the overwhelming fear she had just experienced. She could hear the crackling of flames in the distance, the blaring sirens of emergency vehicles approaching. The night air was sharp, a reminder of how close to death she had come. Yet, there was an overwhelming feeling of gratitude toward the man who had guided her through it all. Mark, the man who had remained calm when the plane was falling apart. She hadn't realized it at first, but every moment, every command he had given, had been a lifeline. His calm gaze, his steady voice, and his precise movements had kept her grounded, even when everything else was unraveling around her. As she moved away from the wreckage, she looked around at the other survivors. Some were still in shock, sitting on the ground, dazed, trying to process what had just happened. Others were being helped by emergency responders, some with injuries, others simply too overwhelmed to move. Emily felt the weight of what they had all just survived. The horror of it was still sinking in, but there was something else, something she couldn't explain, something that told her that she owed her life to the man in seat 6C. She had never even spoken to him, yet his presence had been enough. His silent authority had turned panic into action, chaos into order. She took a shaky step forward, trying to make sense of the surreal moment. The crash had been violent, terrifying, but in the middle of it all, Mark had been there. Not just a passive observer, but a quiet force that had given her the strength to stay in her seat when her body screamed to move. He had known, somehow, that staying put was the only way to survive. Emily turned her gaze back to the wreckage. The fire was now raging, but in the chaos, it seemed distant, almost irrelevant. They had made it. She had made it. And it was because Mark had commanded it. Suddenly, she noticed a figure moving through the crowd. Mark. He was walking toward the wreckage, scanning the area with the same controlled precision he had shown on the plane. He was checking the survivors, making sure no one was left behind. His movements were deliberate, not rushed. He had seen this before, she realized. He was the calm in the eye of the storm, the one who would always have control when everyone else lost it. Emily hesitated, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She had so many questions. How had he known exactly what to do? How had he stayed so calm? And most of all, why had he chosen her to guide? But before she could gather her thoughts, Mark's eyes met hers across the crowd. For a brief moment, their gaze locked. There was no need for words. His eyes said it all. He was checking on everyone. He was still in control, and he had helped them all survive. Emily took a deep breath. As the emergency teams began to take over, she knew the crisis was far from over. But for the first time since the plane had begun its descent, she felt like the world was no longer spinning out of control. She was alive, and she had Mark too. Thank for it. Mark's calmness had been a beacon of stability. He hadn't just saved her, he had saved everyone around him. His presence had made the difference between panic and survival. And as the rescue teams continued their work, Emily's gratitude only grew. She watched him move through the crowd, offering quiet instructions to the emergency personnel, guiding passengers to safety with a steady hand. His authority was unmistakable, yet there was no arrogance. He was simply doing what needed to be done, with precision, without hesitation. As Emily slowly made her way toward the emergency responders, she could feel the weight of the moment settling in. The crash had been a nightmare, terrifying. But in the middle of it all, Mark had been there. not just a passive observer, but a quiet force that had given her the strength to stay in her seat when her body screamed to move. He had known somehow that staying put was the only way to survive.